It's all spent. You good girl?
We're live.
We are live.
You sound good. I don't know. The intro was horrible, but just say hi.
Hi. I understand that we had quite the on-ramp filled with obstacles to this particular program. It is pretty stormy, as you can see in the background. And if I have just been sitting here and looking stupid, well, I didn't know what else to do, since we didn't know that the intro had finally played and we are now live. But welcome to the Ocean Studio of the Yahowah blog. You can tell this is a live streamed program, and we don't always know how it's going to work out, even with our best efforts. It is a very beautifully stormy day. I happen to personally love rainy days. I like the blustery wind that comes with it, and the temperature change that's part of it, and this whole experience in the tropics, when you go from the bright sunlight to the stormy skies, and then even have the opportunity for some liquid sunshine. It is really what makes the tropics so beautiful. It causes the greenery that you see all around me, and we just happen to love it. And one of the advantages, and I don't want to rub it in for those who are living in cold climes, but of rainy and stormy days here, is that we still are in the mid 80s, and so the rain is warm, and it's like a caress from the sky. So it is a wonderful experience, and we are delighted to be able to share it with you, which is why we try to have at least one or two programs every week from our ocean studio, even if we fight the elements from time to time. And this may be one of those where the sky is let loose and it starts to rain. And if it does, that is okay with us. We will make the proper adjustments. In a previous program from our ocean studio, we were focused on the message that is presented in Devarim 29. Devarim means words. It is the actual name of the final book of the Torah. Torah means guidance and teaching. It's the first 5 books of Yahweh's testimony to us. It has been renamed Deuteronomy for extraordinary, inappropriate reasons in Greek. I hate using that name, but sometimes I have to say it just so that you know where we are in the text. Devarim opened with a profound prophecy, one that very few people have been willing to consider, which I've had to live with here for the last 24 years. So I decided it was appropriate to share it with you, which is that it announces that in the last days, and we are certainly now in them, we're only 8 years away from Yahowah and Dowd's return. It's going to happen in 2033. We're at year 5992 Yah as we sit here in the final days of 2025. 2033 will be year 6000 Yah. If you're Jewish and you think that no, it's a different year because of the rabbinical calendar. That calendar was designed by Maimonides based upon the number 19 and the sanctification of the moon, and it was based on the timing of creation. So he was off, depending on how you want to look at it, either by 14 billion years or by 197 years in terms of the actual timeline beginning with our exile from the garden. And in 6,000 years from the time we were exiled from the garden, which is important, we will return to it. And that the dates are actually readily discernible from the Torah itself and from the prophets, so that we know that in year 0, Adam and Towrah were sent out of the garden, that 2,000 years later, which is 50 Yobel, Abraham and Yishak climbed Mount Moriah. to celebrate Pesach, where Yahweh said, I will provide the lamb, and did so with his beloved son, exactly 40 Yobel later, in exactly the same spot, on exactly the same day of the year, with Dowd, David, God's beloved son, our Messiah and King, fulfilling Passover as the lamb, and then his soul carrying our guilt into Sheol to deposit it there, never to be seen again, so that we could join him as the firstborn children of God on Bekurim. This gives us a great understanding of timing, because in 555 BCE, Dowd, as Gabriel, God's most courageous and compassionate man, visited with Daniel in Babylon to tell him the exact date that he would fulfill Chag Matzah, these first three spring Miqraey, in 33 CE, establishing that as year 4000 Yah. And then, of course, 40 Yobel from 33 CE, which is 40 times 50, or 2,000 years, brings us to 2033, which will be year 6000 Yah. And just as the first three Moed Miqraey were fulfilled in year 33 CE, year 4000 Yah, we will find that the final three Miqraey, which are Chag Sukkah, will be fulfilled in year 6000 Yah, which is why we know their dates as September 23 and 24 for Taruwah. In 2033, the 2nd of October, 6:22 p.m. as the sun sets in Jerusalem, when Yahweh and the Messiah Dowd will return. And then, of course, on the 2nd of October, on 5 days after the 2nd of October, I should say, which is the 7th of October, also a Shabbat in 2033, we will be allowed back into the garden to celebrate Sukkah for 1,000 years, restored to the conditions that were experienced in Eden. These are Yahweh's most important dates, and he wants you to know them. Now, because the 29th chapter of Devarim and the Torah spoke of this arrival of a Ha-Nakry, of an observant foreigner during the last days, and said that he would be responsible for restoring this final remnant of Yisrael, doing so on Taruwah, so that they might return to the garden. We have pursued this toward the end of the chapter, and now we are recognizing that the nation that Ha-Nakry, this observant foreigner, has emerged, is going to receive a horrible jolt. It's going to be treated very much like Sodom and Gomorrah that it has become. And this is important because it is the same nation that the Ha-Nakry has emerged from, which is the United States of America, that will be responsible for betraying Israel. This is made very clear in the 17th and 18th chapters of Yeshaya, Isaiah, such that we know that the current president of the United States, Donald Trump, happens to be the great betrayer. He is the person that Christians would identify as the Antichrist. He is demon-possessed. And so, as a result of betraying Israel, which is what the United States will ultimately do. It did so yesterday in the UN resolution. It is doing so today as they meet with MBS of Saudi Arabia in the White House. And it will continue to do so through Shabuah of next year, which is the 22nd of May, 2026, which is the last possible date for the two-state solution to be imposed to make Israel indefensible. We know the timeline, and God has provided all of this information for us. And in telling us about the belligerence of both the Torahless one, this great betrayer of Israel, and his nation, God says that, like Sodom and Gomorrah, this is what's going to happen to America. He said, Brimstone, with its purifying blue light, sulfur bearing the stench of decay, and salt, sodium chloride, the element which kills plants and yet preserves the flavors of food, will change the composition but not consume this entire country, the totality of this land. Nothing will be sown, no seeds will be dispersed or planted with no yield, and thus no first fruits, no children or family. and nothing will sprout up. And along with all of this, vegetation will no longer rise, similar to the destruction of Sodom, which is scorched, and Gomorrah, the manipulative, tyrannical Gomorrah, of Admah, the reddish ground, and Seboim, the swelling of the adulteress, which Yahweh destroyed in his resentment and in his hostility. Dabarim words never should have been called Deuteronomy 29:23. There are powerful insights in this, and we can see them being conveyed to us even with the storms brewing behind us. Brimstone is and salt upon the earth is indicative of nuclear holocaust. This time, Yahweh won't have to rain down sulfur. It will happen as a result of the United States acting so belligerently towards both, all three really, China, Russia, and Iran, all of which are nuclear powers, all of which are going to hold the United States accountable for its belligerence. And America is going to be badly wounded as a result of this. And there are likely other things that will occur. It could well be a massive volcano eruption that would be the result of, say, the cauldron of Yellowstone reemerging. It could also be a volcanic eruption in Carne Viejo, in the islands off the coast of Africa, one of which is a volcanic island where the entire side, the western side of that slope, is exceedingly unstable. One day it will definitely fall into the sea, and when it does, it's going to create a tsunami that would salt the eastern portion of the United States, which would also fulfill this prophecy, because that tsunami would be some 500 feet high and race across the Atlantic at the range of some 500 miles an hour. So this is going to have a profound effect on the United States. I see Rich, as our producer's got his thumb up into the wind, trying to decide if it is going to rain and we need to cover our gear. May not seem like much, but we have somewhere between $5,000 and $10,000 of equipment that is ultimately exposed when we do a program like this. We've invested heavily to bring a professional product to you through the Yahowah blog, even if the host himself doesn't appear at times. So this is indicative of what's going to happen to the United States. And the United States is only mentioned because in Isaiah 18, it is the country most responsible for ultimately betraying Israel. And what happened, Netanyahu played right into the prophecy that when he did what I said he would do and should not do, which is to enter Gaza militarily with the intent of disarming and eliminating Hamas. What I told Israel in an open letter at the time, that if you do this, you will lose not only the war, but you'll lose Israel. And that you will make a bad situation worse, because an Islamic foe that celebrates martyrdom and death in an entirely Islamic enclave cannot be defeated with bullets and bombs. You have to fight Islam differently. And the best approach is to read and capitalize upon my 5 volumes of Goddamn Religion, which is free at yadayah.com, so that you know your enemy and attack them appropriately. And I gave Israel a 5-point plan that if they followed, Israel would have prevailed, but it ignored that plan and used one that essentially destroyed Gaza, did not eliminate Hamas, and turned the entire world against Israel, isolating and demonizing Israel such that Israel now has become a vassal of Donald J. Trump. And recognizing that Trump is the Torahless one, the great betrayer that was spoken of throughout the prophets as the literal incarnation of Satan, that is a horrible position to put Israel in. And this is why Yahowah has had it with the United States and is going to ultimately see to it that it is destroyed. Now, he's not going to have to do anything. America is doing this to itself, but nonetheless, America is going to receive what it deserves for having become like Sodom and Gomorrah. I mean, you have a president that has obviously been a pedophile and a rapist, who is accepting bribes, who is a thief, who is a liar, who acts in a manipulative and tyrannical manner like Amora. What would you expect? And you have MAGAs who support him, and a nation that has turned and become exceedingly anti-Semitic against Israel with its influencers. This is what God says you brought upon yourself. You have no one to blame but yourself. As it relates to the swelling of the adulteress, that is really interesting, because ultimately the solution for this remnant of Israel, and 40% of Jews worldwide actually live in America, is that the sacrifice of the Adam of Parah on Taruwah, this bloody red man of the earth who has become so productive, is played out according to Numbers 19 for the benefit of Numbers 5 and the adulterous woman. And it is the swelling of her belly when she drinks the waters that will be released from the Temple Mount beneath the incineration of the body of the Adam of Parah, which will be on the Temple Mount, and the waters will come from beneath the Temple Mount to purge Yisrael of her religious guilt, so that the remnant can, and the job of the Ha-Nakry can return to Yahweh and witness his return, that her belly will bloat if she is unworthy, if she cannot be trusted to enter the millennial Shabbat, where we return to Eden. Her belly will bloat. And if she is worthy, then she will have child again and be productive. So that is what that reference is discussing. So should the salting of the land be a result of a natural event, and I think it is, I think it's the tsunami that is going to be so devastating to the United States when I think it's Carne Viejo is the island that the site of that volcano tumbles into the sea. Of course, it could also be the effect of an earthquake. In fact, an earthquake, I hope it doesn't happen in this region, but we are on a fault. It would also cause a tsunami to hit the United States. But there are other reasons for them. And, hurricanes season, we've had a number of the worst hurricane seasons recently. And although they passed this island because the Malak are protecting my home per Yahweh's instructions, the fact is that they bring enormous waves of water inland, and this could be a part of the problem as well. But the big part of this is that the United States has contributed to the final solution, which is the abandonment of Israel and the creation of a terrorist state carved out of its midst. And as a result of that, America will receive what it has given out, and since it has now been infiltrated with Muslims, it will endure what Muslims do. For 14 centuries, Muslims have perpetrated apartheid and genocide on Jews, and there is no reason to expect that they will do any different going forward. So the pre-Nazi era in 1887 was the seventh worst year for hurricanes in American history. Having turned away ships of Jewish refugees, the U.S. would be in the eye of the storms again in 1933 and 1936 during the beginning of the Holocaust, with those years ranking as the second and 11th worst in American history. Then during the rise of the Islamic assaults against Israel, where America not only funded but armed these Muslims, we find 1969, when the rage against Israel reached a new zenith as the 8th worst year. In 1995, the 6th worst year for hurricanes, the U.S. brokered the Oslo Accords, and that's when they were signed, legitimizing the Fakistinian Authority, the PLO, if you will. It was the same time that Bill Clinton refused to sign a bill that would have listed Jerusalem as the capital of Israel. These storms, born of the sea, comprised of salt and synonymous with Gentiles, took a vicious toll in 2000 as Clinton sought concessions from Israel to appease the Syrians, the 15th worst year for hurricanes in the United States. Then in 2001, 2003, and 2004, upon the heels of the second intifada, as George Bush announced his roadmap to peace, or two-state hallucination, to appease the Muslims, the U.S. experienced its 14th, 10th, and 13th stormiest years in history, with the cost of Ivan alone tallying over $13 billion. Then in 2004, Charlie and Ivan inundated Florida, costing a staggering $31 billion. In 2005, as the United States forced Israel to cede control of Gaza to Hamas, that was the brainchild of George W. Bush, and evacuate the settlements in the West Bank, making Alaska flood in 2023 possible, and collectively severed Israel's connection with that territory and buffer in that territory, serving as the first of the steps towards narrowing Israel at the waist, which will be part of this final solution. Americans suffered their single worst year for named storms, going through the entire alphabet and then some, with the worst tempest being Katrina, costing the U.S. $134 billion for the idiocy of building a city below sea level, followed by Wilma and Rita, destroying another $34 billion of the United States. And in 2007, perhaps as a consequence of the United Nations' demand for an Israeli withdrawal from Lebanon before Hezbollah could be uprooted and its rockets destroyed, the land housing that international cesspool endured its 12th worst year for oceanic storms. With a world led by the U.S. contributing to a lie against the promised land, 2008 was the 9th worst year, culminating with Ike's $27 billion impact on Texas. Then, as America elected its first Muslim-born president, U.S.-Israeli relations digressed to their lowest point since the nation's formation. An infuriated and anti-Semitic Barack Obama told Israel that they would face complete international isolation and opposition if they didn't capitulate to his demand to give Jerusalem and the West Bank to the Islamic terrorists. America was consequently besieged by a rapid succession of ocean-borne beasts, with the rapid progression of storms in 2010, the 10th worst season, 2011, the 4th worst season, and 2012, the 3rd worst season on record, all taking their tragic toll, salting the land. The costliest onslaught would then follow, with the succession of Harvey, Irma, and Maria, occurring in 2017, while Trump was proposing the sale of $100 billion of advanced weaponry to Saudi Arabia. He would later instruct his administration to vote against Israel for the first time in the United Nations, denouncing their presence in the Golan. The following year, Trump would reverse course and support Israel. So I find it interesting that in August of 2019, I was less than 100 miles from the eye of the second most powerful oceanic storm in recorded history, Dorian, a Cat 5 hurricane with sustained winds above 190 and gusts exceeding 225 miles an hour. The Great Abaco in the northeastern Bahamas, where I had intended to be on that day with my boat. Virtually every home was destroyed, and thousands of souls were swept into the sea. With a storm surge of 15 feet and massive waves cresting above it, the land was cleared and salted. Dorian's eye had been expected to make landfall just north of Fort Lauderdale and would have destroyed my boat on the intercoastal had it not abruptly changed course and turned north a few minutes after I reminded our Father that he had promised to protect my home. And may there be an understanding of this correlation, because I was, of course, relieved. And since no storm of this magnitude has ever stalled and changed course so abruptly, going from due west to due north in a 90-degree turn just 50 miles from landfall, potentially destroying the Florida coast. America's position on Israel, even though fleeting and capricious, likely played a factor. Speculating further, the Bahamas, as previously part of the British Empire and now overwhelmingly Christian, has not been kind to Jews, and the Haitians living there, who represented the vast majority of those swept out to sea, have been poisoned by a voodoo culture that has rendered the community especially corrupt and virtually unsalvageable, and of course, exceedingly anti-Semitic. Now, what happens next takes us into the future. Far too few people know and use Yahweh's name today, circa 2025, for Kol Goyim, all the Gentiles of every nation, to express it, even in a question. After all, if they knew Yahweh's name, chances are they would know why this was occurring. And hopefully this books that I have written, these series of 35 called Know Yahweh, Yada Yahweh, those who have come to them and read them, and who have listened to the many thousands of radio programs and now audio vlogs that we have done, will be better prepared. They will do as Yahweh has instructed. They will focus their attention on the pronouncements of Yahweh, and that will serve to educate and enlighten them as never before. And so there will be a significant number of Gentiles that will respond favorably. Now, considering the fact that Moshe was speaking of an event nearly 3,500 years in his future, regarding the people and culture speaking languages he could not possibly understand, there is another potential here. Kol, which is typically rendered every or all, could speak of most, majority, or just many. Rather than translating Goyim as Gentiles or nations, it could be addressing non-Hebrew ethnicities, those estranged from or opposed to Israel, religious and political individuals, or the nation's cultures or religions in which they congregate. As such, Gentiles of every ethnicity seems like an appropriate translation of Kol Goyim. Further, as Asher, my yellow lab, who is more white, I guess, than yellow, who was a puppy when I first made this translation, and is now a more mature young dog. Not so much young anymore. I guess Asher is almost 9 years old now. She's looking pretty good, though, thanks to Rich's help. But nonetheless, Asher and I were walking along the beach in the Bahamas one morning when we met a very nice Bahamian man who worked God into almost every statement, from good morning, God, to we are all God's children. And while he did not know Yahweh's name, God, as he imagined him, was his highest priority. He knew that he existed. He knew that he was responsible for our existence, even that he had a plan for our lives, and that he wanted us to know him and relate to him. So since Moshe knew his name, he may have posed the following question from his perspective, using his vocabulary rather than that of the Goyim. Moreover, this question seems to imply that it's one nation in particular, or at least one region, which will be devastated, one which is of great concern to the world at large. And if that is true, then it is likely that of Ha-Nakry, this observant foreigner. His nation is indeed a great distance from Israel, of great concern to every nation on earth, home to the greatest concentration of Jews outside of Israel, and speaks the most pervasive language on earth, English. It is also the nation rebuked in Isaiah 18 for its role in narrowing Israel and arming her enemies, such that the war becomes inevitable. So listen, this is what Moshe revealed as inspired by Yahweh. Then Gentiles of every ethnicity will question, for what reason has Yahweh acted in this manner towards this country What has caused this intense animosity, this great antagonism? Dabadim words never should have been called Deuteronomy 29:24. Now, apart from the use of Yahweh's name, up to this point, these are just questions most might ask. In fact, people are always looking for someone or something to blame. Catholics continue to blame Jews for killing their God. Muslims blame Jews for their lack of success. Not the Jewish lack of success, the Muslim lack of success. The conspiratorialists blame Jews for that which they themselves are guilty of doing. And socialist secularists blame Jews for oppressing those who are actually terrorizing them. It's a pretty confused world out there, isn't it? Beyond this, until more people consider these translations and resulting insights, it's hard to fathom how Gentiles will come to realize that Yahudim, Jews, are reaping the consequences of neglecting Yahweh and his covenant, while also failing to appreciate the prophetic nature and purpose of the first Exodus. Said another way, since the following conclusion is correct, a significant number of Goyim will become aware of who God is and what he's doing and why he's engaged in this manner. The positive aspect of the next 8 years, which are going to be the worst in human history, which are going to be so destructive, the prophets say that there is nothing like it in the history of the world, in which we are going to experience the annihilation of much of humankind, the death of 2 out of every 3 Jews. And they're going to fare better probably than Goyim fare. There's going to be world war, terrible calamities, economic collapse, absolute chaos. And as these things happen, people are finally going to say, oh, obviously I can't trust my politicians. Obviously I can't trust my religion. Obviously I can't trust my military. I can't trust my economic system. Who am I going to trust? Because the world is literally falling apart. People are dying everywhere. And this is a time when more people from more places are going to recognize maybe it is true that there really is a God, that the Torah is correct, that his name is Yahweh, and that this Ha-Nakry is indeed speaking for him, and that we need to learn what he is saying, consider it, and respond to it. So this is the plan. God says of his people that during the time of Israel's troubles, this last 7 years, beginning 22 May 2026 and running through 23-24 September 2033, that this is precisely what is going to happen. That Israel's going to recognize that they cannot rely on Judaism. They cannot rely on their political parties. They cannot rely on the IDF. And as such, the only one they can turn to finally, at long last, after abandoning Yahweh during the Exodus, is to return to Yahweh. So it's going to have a positive cleansing, therapeutic effect on God's people. Also, based on what follows, logic dictates that the nation being destroyed has a name. It's the United States of America, the God of their fathers, and being led out of Egypt. References apply only to Yehudim Jews. Over 40% of the worldwide population of Israelites, at least those who acknowledge themselves as such, live in America, which represents 2/3 of those currently living outside of Israel. Further, since there does not seem to be another candidate writing about such things on behalf of Yahweh and the chosen people, the nation in which all of these books and the radio programs were written and spoken, at least up to the point that I left and have ventured out to sea, it has been the United States. Fire and brimstone comes. You have become Sodom and Gomorrah. You betrayed Israel. There is a consequence for your actions. Moreover, they will say, regarding the way to the relationship, they either neglected or they rejected the covenant with Yahweh, the God of their fathers, which he established with them by bringing them out of the realm of the crucibles of religious and political oppression. Dabadim words in the Torah should never have been called Deuteronomy 29:25. To know this answer is to, of course, understand the very nature of the covenant and the purpose of the Exodus. While it's right, currently less than 1 in a million are aware of what Yahweh revealed. So this is not common knowledge, at least now, but it will be when Yahweh returns. It is nonetheless true. And speaking to the remnant of Jews living in America who are unwilling to leave political Babylon, which is America, Moshe is reminding us that they remain estranged from the covenant that Yahweh established with their fathers. And that's in part because they have not made the connections that we have throughout Yahweh, that the exodus from Egypt was a harbinger of the final trip home, quite literally the final solution for the real Jewish problem, which is estrangement from God. The final exodus will be from Babylon, the commingling of religious and political lies with the truth. Far too many years have passed. It has been far too long. And truthfully, really, it goes all the way back from the time of Dowd's initial reign as king of Israel 3,000 years ago, such that God's people have a zob. They have neglected and or rejected their place in the covenant. And the God who offered it to them, they have erased Yahweh's name. They have changed their name from Yahud, which means beloved of Yah, to Jews. It means nothing. They deny the Torah and prefer the Talmud. They have been harassed and abused by those who covet and claim what they have squandered. There is one thing worse, of course, than neglecting and or rejecting Yahweh and his family, and that is chasing after and serving false gods. And yet, sadly, this has become mankind's proclivity, with virtually everyone pursuing and working on behalf of gods conceived by men. And in the case of the largest two religions in the world, God is no bigger than a man or stone. And of course, in Judaism, they've turned Hashem into the voice of the rabbis. It's sad, isn't it? The Torah proclaims, but they pursued and they served other gods, in addition to verbally explaining their allegiance with them. These are gods with whom they were unfamiliar and which are actually unknowable, in opposition to Yada, negating and dividing them, deceiving and dispersing them. Debating words, Deuteronomy 29:26. Why? Why has man pursued and served false gods? I mean, look at Christianity, for crying out loud. God's not a man. Men can't kill God. Resurrection isn't the solution to anything. Paul admitted he was demon-possessed, and he wrote the first 14 books of the Christian New Testament. He's the one who invented Iesu Christou, who is nothing but a counterfeit of David, stealing his titles, and in the process stealing the inheritance that was due to Israel and Yehudim, while claiming that Jews killed the Christian gods so that they need to be dehumanized and demonized. Why does the world accept such a stupid religion? Why does the world accept Islam? I mean, that's got to be the dumbest religion ever. A religion that wouldn't even exist if rabbis hadn't sold Muhammad Talmud readings, which he incorporated into his Quran to make it seem religious. I mean, Allah spends all of his time in hell. He is the ultimate dunderhead. Muhammad was no more a prophet than he was a turnip. He was a horrible man, a rapist, a pedophile. He was a slave trader. He was a ruthless terrorist and a committed liar, a thief. Why does the world believe such stupidity? Why are there some 5 to 6 billion people that are caught up in such absolute idiocy? And why do these religions all turn on Jews, abusing God's people, disparaging them? Of all the things which must aggravate and annoy Yahweh, it's hard to imagine anything worse than his creation's propensity to create and worship false gods, claiming to know him, claiming to speak for him, claiming to be inspired and authorized by him. Clerics the world over have ignored his testimony and written lies and promoted frauds which have poisoned the minds and corrupted the souls of billions upon billions of people through Christianity, Islam, and Judaism. It must sicken Yah when anyone does such a thing, especially when they forcefully impose their faith. But it must cause him incalculable grief when his people advance these corruptions and when the resulting concoctions are used to plague Israel and Yehudah, particularly since it was Jews that created all three of those religions, Judaism, Christianity, and Islam. Oh, what a travesty. Can you imagine being God and having done so much for humankind, looking upon your creation and finding no one receptive to you, no one willing to listen to what you have to say and offer? And worse, imagine the most powerful and influential civilizations, religious institutions, and militant nations such as Imperial Rome, the Roman Catholic Church, Islam, and now the United States of America, vociferously contending to be godly, with devastating consequences for your people when they're more like Sodom and Gomorrah than they are the ideal of the covenant. And so the animosity of Yahweh against this nation, against this land, will bring it all of the harmful consequences that were written in this scroll. The Debatim words should never have been called Deuteronomy 29:17. America, as confirmed in the book of Yeshaya, Isaiah, in the 17th and 18th chapter. You have become Sodom and Gomorrah. You have brought hell upon yourselves. There's going to be total economic collapse, a cavalcade of damaging storms and tsunamis. There will be volcanic eruptions and earthquakes. And of course, there will be world war. And in this world war, there will be atomic conflagrations. You should expect utter destruction of much of the United States, certainly its cities. And it didn't happen to be this way. But heck, you elected the Antichrist. What would you expect after that? The Torah presents a balanced presentation of commendation and condemnation, of credits and, of course, debits, of love and its reciprocal, hate, of good and bad, such that we are aware of the consequence of our choices. If we choose Yahweh, if we act upon the conditions of his covenant, and if we accept his invitations to meet with him, we will receive the promised benefits. If we negate all of this, well, of course, we will die, neglected by God. And if we constantly lead others astray, deceiving them, then we'll be convicted, we'll be incarcerated, consistent with the Torah's guidance in this regard as well. So as we turn to address Moshe's next statement, unless something is uprooted in a manner which shows great care for that which is being transplanted, and unless it is immediately and appropriately replanted and watered, it will die. What once grew is like a weed plucked completely from the ground, whose roots are exposed to the sun and wind and thus incapable of growing again. These would be weeds, therefore. And Yahweh, he will uproot them. He will pull them out of the ground from upon their land in frustration and in antagonism. Then, as if snapping a twig in anger, he will throw them into another land, consistent with this day. I think that Yahweh is, of course, speaking of the remnant of his people that are in America that should know better. And Jews in America typically fall into three groups. You have about 40% of them that are super secular to the point of being Marxists, exceedingly progressive politically. You have 30-40% of them that are either ultra-Orthodox or heretic, which is nothing but parasites. And you have those in the middle, good, decent people, bright, industrious, but they don't know Yahowah. And that needs to change. Now, fortunately, Yahowah has arranged for 4 chariots for Taruwah. And one of those, the red chariot, is going to stay in Jerusalem. It is the place for the Adam up Ra, the bloody red man of the earth, that's going to offer his Bashar body as the means to purge the returning Yehudim and Israelites, even Goyim, of their religious guilt. A black chariot will go and will remove all of the Yehud and the Israelites who are still religious, those dressed in black, for example, those who sponsor the blackness and the darkness, the gloom of Marxism. He's going to remove them and take them away, but not to a favorable outcome. And then there will be a white chariot that will bring those Yehudim and Israelites from around the world who hold promise, who are not so poisoned by religion and politics that they're guilty only by omission, not commission. They're those who have been stained by religion and politics, but not the perpetrators of it. And they will be brought to Jerusalem, where they will be purged, ready, if you will, to receive Dowd as the Messiah and God to return on Kippurim and enter the millennial Shabbat to celebrate our return to the garden. And then there is the dappled chariot that will go amongst the nations and will pick up the Goyim, who have the right attitude and aptitude to benefit from what is transpiring on Taruwah in Jerusalem. So remember this day, and know that on it there were still many stuck in Moab, the modern manifestation, which is politically correct, multicultural, as a milieu of socialist secularism and Pauline Christianity. Who's your daddy is the meaning of the name. Most Jews remain in this place, embracing the former while harassed by the latter. Most Jews remain uprooted and will occasionally on this occasion die. And some will die in this place, others will be carted away. And not unlike what occurred 80 years ago in Europe, it's going to get very rough en route to this time. So there is a tendency for English Bibles to butcher the concluding statement in Devarim 29:29. For them, it is as if Yahowah was revealing all of this for absolutely no reason other than for his bemusement. These type of translations read, "The secret things belong unto the Lord our God." That's the King James, the New American Standard Bible, and the new the NIV, the New International Version. Or, "The Lord our God has secrets known to no one. We are not accountable for them." That would be in the NILT, the New Living, not a translation. But why would God keep secrets? Why bother with 40 prophets over 4,000 years if, the main prophets, 20 of them over 1,000 years that we have the recording text? Why bother? If God wanted to remain hidden and unknown, if he didn't want us to figure things out. Now, that's the reason I wrote the 35 volumes that we offer free of Yahowah, to know Yahowah, to be aware of what he's offering and expects in return, all free at yahowah.com. So the New World, yeah, it was hidden from view, but it was hardly a secret before it was discovered. So were atoms and DNA. They have always been there and observable, just not known. It took the desire to know, the time and the energy to explore, the creation and use of the right tools, and the courage to go where most dared not tread to find these things. Same is true with Yahowah's testimony. The words have been written there down for a very long time expressly for us to observe them. And by doing so, we have discovered and shared thousands of insights not previously known. The fact that God's name is pronounced as Yahowah, and that the Torah means teaching, not law, that there are 3 destinations for human souls, 5 conditions of the covenant, and that there is a means to approach God through his 7 Moed Miqraey, particularly when attended as intended. All are examples of what we have found by more fully and accurately rendering God's testimony, particularly from the oldest extant sources. At issue here is that law is a preposition which can be rendered concerning or approaching, but not belong, nor in the manner presented in the Nilt. So, in actuality, Moshe is addressing how the things which are unknown prior to investigation and the things which have been revealed more openly work together as part of Yahweh's eternal witness, collectively conveying the Torah's teaching so that we might approach God by responding appropriately to him. It reads, the concealed things, the hidden, which are not readily known, realizations, which are kept safe and have been protected, concerning and about Yahweh, our God, and the things which are revealed, then discovered and become openly known, are for us to approach and for our descendants to draw near forever and ever as an eternal witness to the restoring testimony, so that we may approach by acting upon and engaging in all of the words of this Torah, this source of teaching and guidance. The Debatim words should never have been called Deuteronomy 29:29. Isn't that magnificent when rendered appropriately? It's always been a matter of going where the words lead. And that is because every word of the Torah leads home to the covenant, to Yahweh. This is what Moshe knew. This is what the greatest of the prophets have taught. Other than Dowd, no one knew Yahweh better than did Moshe. It would be wise, therefore, to trust his assessment of the Torah and its covenant. So speaking of him, in fact, to Moshe, and in the same book, the Torah, Yahweh himself said, and it shall come to pass, if they will not trust or rely upon you, nor listen to the voice of the first and foremost, the top and most prominent sign providing proof, then they will trust and rely upon the cold voice of the last sign providing proof. Shemoth Exodus 4:8. If you rejected what Moshe said, as most Jews did because they told God to shut up and go away, they never wanted to hear him and see him again. The whole Exodus process is about rejecting Yahweh and the covenant. That's the story. It's hateful. It's resentful. It's obnoxious. And they didn't trust Yahweh, and they didn't trust Moshe. They tried to kill Moshe. Moshe even went to God and said, these people are impossible. If you have any respect for me, you'll kill me, rather than me having to endure them another day. But they don't listen to the voice of Yahweh. They didn't listen to Moshe. In fact, when Moshe conveyed in Debatim, listen, Yisrael, Yahweh, your God is one, rather than listening and acknowledging that Yahweh is one and that he is God, they turned it into a prayer. They speak it rather than hearing it. And they replaced Yahweh's name with Adonai, the Lord, which is Satan's title. That's how far Jews are away from the truth. So God says, if you're not going to listen to the first and the most prominent of my messengers, then perhaps then you will listen and come to trust and rely upon the coal, the voice of the last of my witnesses. You're listening to him. You're listening to him speak with the storm swirling behind. You're listening to the voice of the sea with the sea behind. You're listening to the voice of Yahowah, his last witness to his people. How will you respond?